British F4 might have some serious broadcast issues, but when they get around to streaming all of the races, that series really delivers. Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. As the title suggests, I've got 3 reasons for you to watch British F4 in this video, and that is not even including the brilliant title battle. But of course, I'll run you through the entire single-seater action of the week as well, from Central European F4 to IndyCar, so let's get straight to it. We'll start nice and easy with the Central European Zone F4 round at Most, where the usual familiar Genso domination was in full effect yet again, with Gino Trapper back from last week's Euroformula Open debut yet again in full control of his 3 teammates for the most part. With 2 rounds to go, the title looks more or less decided at this point, even though sophomore Max Caran is trying rather hard to keep the dream alive. Instead of the Genso army, I want to once again take the time to highlight Danish karting graduate David Walter for consistently dragging his car into the battle for best of the rest, including some big attacking drives to even get there in the first place. Hell, even that third race required quite the charge after losing his front wing on the opening lap. I can't stress enough just how much I want to see that kid in a competitive car in something like Italian F4. I reckon he'd surprise a lot of people. British F4 might have been the most exciting series last weekend in a way, and that is despite some bangers in F2 and Formula E respectively. The title battle between the ever-brilliant Fionn McLaughlin and Hungarian stud Martin Molnar is still alive and well, although Molnar did lose some key points with an incident in the final race. You know the drill by now, I'm backing McLaughlin all the way, but it still warms my heart to watch a Hungarian dick on the opposition as well. The real storylines happened far away from the title battle though if you ask me, and these are my 3 reasons to watch British F4. Most importantly, Ella Lloyd running a fantastic weekend to break 2 of her records. First, she secured her first podium of the season in the reverse grid race, although she has of course managed that last year as well. But more importantly, a P4 in a regular grid race marks a new personal best in those for her, and by far the best drive we've seen from a woman in Global F4 series this year so far, I reckon. Lloyd is hands down one of the most exciting female racing prospects, and these sorts of drivers is really what we hope to see more of with F1 Academy in the future. Women that can score regularly on merit against a reasonably stacked grid of male opposition. I am definitely ready for that future. Our new golden boy, Ari Bansal, is reason number 2, as he has also set a new personal best by taking a clean and comfortable reverse grid win. Sure, only the reverse grid, but considering he is driving for Fortec, I think that still counts as a win, and either way, it absolutely deserves a mention. If you want to hear me praise Bansal a bit more, you just have to go back a couple of episodes. We really do this on a weekly basis over here. And last but not least, Arjen Kräling has finally given his single-seater debut, and while it wasn't quite enough for points just yet, he did more or less hit the ground running with a pair of solid races before it all went to shit a bit in the last one. Kräling is on a bit of a curious career trajectory. He's a pretty big karting talent, but only sort of teased us with that as he abandoned his career to prepare for F4 just as he was finally hitting the front of some of these races. Either way, he is certainly a name to look out for, I just don't quite know to what extent just yet. The USF Juniors were really more of the same for the most part, so we'll leave that and instead move on to Formula 3. Well, I'll have to admit, I was a tiny bit disappointed by Freddie Slater. Of course, it was only his 2nd race going up against the, by now, somewhat experienced competitors, but I had still hoped for a bit more to come out of his reverse pole. I was low-key hoping for a win if I'm being entirely honest. But of course, that is nothing we should hold against him at this stage, just felt like I shouldn't ignore it entirely. Since the title fight itself hasn't really changed much this time out, thanks to the cancelled feature race, let's highlight the mad podium constellation we've got in the sprint, with a maiden win for Noah Stromstead and maiden podiums for Yugo Chukwu and Charlie Wurz respectively. In Wurz's case, I was actually a bit shocked that this was only his first podium, and I think that kinda goes to show just how disappointing this season has been for the Austrian so far, considering he was coming in as a bit of a dark horse for the title, at least in my book. Stromstad has been a bit hit or miss, but he is clearly a quick driver, so it very much felt like a matter of time for him to finally get a win. Really, it is Yugo Yugochukwu whose steady improvement in the second half of the season is the big story, clearly establishing himself as the best driver for an underwhelming Prema, and in that sense he is living up to or even exceeding expectations. Ending up anywhere outside the top 10 in F3 might be a bit of a stain on his CV, but is otherwise entirely meaningless if you ask me. He'll come back with title ambitions next season, I reckon, unless he just makes the jump up to F2 straight away. The feature, of course, doesn't really give me anything to talk about aside from another safety first in junior racing rant, but I wanted to shout out Brad Benavides for taking the pole position. Certainly no easy feat no matter what car you're in, but doing it for AIX is all the more impressive. Another confirmation that Benavides truly looks like a bit of a different driver this season. I don't even know where to begin in F2. Can this title free-for-all get any more crazy with 5 rounds to go? Leo Fornaroli doubling up from last week to take a second sprint victory. Alex Dunn penalised out of an all-important feature win. Lindblad disqualified after inheriting the win, robbing him of an opportunity to match Crawford for most wins of the season. MP letting down Richard Verschoor as predicted. And finally, a first ever podium for former Super Formula champion Rita Momiata. That one has been coming for a long time, hasn't it? Honestly, I found it incredibly tricky to pick out a specific talking point with F2 this season. I am just enjoying to watch the madness unfold. One man does deserve a mention, especially since we've barely ever talked about him so far this season. Roman Stanek has finally bagged his first victory of the year by inheriting the crazy feature win from Dunn and Lindblad. And while this is a lovely result for the Czech driver, it also is a cruel reminder just how underwhelming his season has been so far. I got a little excited after he announced a drive with title-winning virtuosi for 2025, only for him to be comprehensively beaten by rookie Fornaroli at every single step of the way. That isn't to say he was bad by any means, and he was still a pretty regular podium contender, but these sorts of seasons are the final nail in the coffin for any sort of F1 ambitions. Not like those were particularly alive and well after 2 years wasted at Trident anyway, but at least there was always that big caveat next to his F2 CV. Just a bit of a sad turn of events in my opinion. I was always rooting for him. Way too few Eastern European drivers at this level if you ask me. In Formula 1, the weekend was once again all about the McLarens, a vintage Verstappen drive in the sprint notwithstanding. I think this is a good opportunity to actually talk about the Oscar Piastri vs Lando Norris title battle for once. This race was the perfect example for why I think Piastri would be a considerably more deserving champion. Norris just lacks that edge, that last percent that's supposed to turn you from a race winner into a champion. The combination of not converting the pole on a rolling start and making too many mistakes to catch up with the alternate strategy are both mistakes that really can't happen this consistently. Meanwhile, Piastri seems to just use every possible opportunity. Add to that his ice-cold persona and you can see why he'd make an excellent champion in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, these two are incredibly close in terms of pace, but that makes Norris' issues all the more visible. Formula E delivered the, by now, classic drama for the London season finale, even though Ollie Rowland had of course already secured the driver's title. With everything still to play for in the team's championship, Jaguar pulled off an absolute miracle, back-to-back domination from Nick Cassidy to not only steal P2 in the drivers, but also in the team's championship, ending the season with a mighty 3-race win streak. Really makes you wonder whether Cassidy has decided to leave just a tiny bit too early, doesn't it? This partnership should have inarguably resulted in a World Championship title, and last season still stands as an all-time great throw in my opinion. The Mitch Evans related drama in the final race was just a bit silly if you ask me. I understand Cassidy wanting to make a point, but Jaguar standing behind the man leaving at the end of the year was a bit of an absurd look, even if they probably tried to reason with Cassidy as well. Nevertheless, the 1-2 on the road was a proper statement drive from Jaguar to end what was a bit of a shocking season on a relatively high note. Porsche taking the team's title is almost a bit of an afterthought. Not only does it show the well-known competence of the Porsche drivers, more importantly did it highlight the massive issues Norman Natter has been having all season long. Finishing down in a disgusting P20 while your teammate takes the title with 1 round to go might be one of the worst teammate gaps among professional drivers ever, even if it looks worse on the final standings than it looked on track most of the time. I don't know what Natter will be up to next season, but honestly, I hope it won't be driving Formula E cars. Shout out for David Beckman for finally scoring at the very last time of asking. Sure, that is way too little, too late, and he'll probably be out of the series again, but at least he did get that one positive note to end on. Really felt like his confidence was shattered halfway through the season when he kept getting into shenanigans while in a good position to potentially score, and he just never mentally recovered from that. At least that's my take. But I don't want to spend too long talking about Formula E for the time being, as I am planning to make a proper Formula E review video. Feel free to let me know whether you'd be interested in that. Instead, let's look at the road to Indy, where in the USF Juniors we've had a bit of a different looking team dynamic, with both Zanella and VRD a bit more on the back foot than we're used to. This left the door open for a couple of other strong runners to impress, most importantly the ever flashy Formula Ford graduate Liam Loiacono. The Aussie has probably been the most well-rounded driver all season, and fair enough, he is a bit older than most of his opponents, and might just get a chance to upset Leo Scorpioni in the title fight, thanks to a perfect weekend here at Road America. Really not much to say about it, comfortable wins across the many restarts in all of these races. We can also shout out Brendan Cooley once again, this time earning his maiden podium as yet another step of his consistent improvement, and a strong front-running weekend across the board really. Much like his older brother, he might have not hit the ground running immediately, but is learning at a rapid rate and will presumably be a more important player wherever he ends up next season. And once again a shout out for the Gonzalez brothers as well, as both Rodrigo and Patricio have scored new personal bests this weekend, Rodrigo finding a P2 and Patricio making it onto the podium for the first time in his young career. Once again, another pair of drivers with steady improvement all year long. Don't forget, in some ways that is a more important metric than outright pace when we're talking about a series for literal 14-year-olds. In IndyCar, we've had the return of Alex Palou on the top step, and not just with any old win. Instead, we've got to witness utter domination, almost like Palou wanted to make sure nobody can doubt him even with a short winless streak, as if anyone did do that in the first place. I still thought it was worth a mention just how much he obliterated his opposition this time, outrageous margins for a spec series. For the neat trajectory segment, I want to highlight both Callum Eilert and Christian Rasmussen once again. Something has clearly clicked at Prema, even if this result did require a well-executed strategy that is kinda expected in this series after all. And Rasmussen might just be the revelation of the season, to come back from a bit of a crashy start to his career to what he has been doing in these recent rounds, and at ECR nonetheless. He is quickly putting his name out there as one of the hottest younger prospects for a top seed in the future, I reckon. I may have to skip Indy next for personal reasons, but we've still got time for our quick weekly karting report. Champions of the Future is rapidly getting towards the end of the season with its penultimate round in Denmark last weekend. The UK Juniors title battle is still the same four-way between William Kaligia, Eiley Kreischen, Noah Baglin and Henry Domain, as none of them had the sort of great weekend required to get the opposition. Only Domain has more or less lost his chance. He might be mathematically in contention, but has had a bit of an off weekend for what felt like the first time all year, and this is his punishment. Meanwhile, we got a totally different group at the front with Bosco Arias, Valerio Villapiana, Turner Brown and eventual winner Michael McGoy stealing the headlines this time out. And while the sharp end of both Champions of the Future and the European Championship has looked pretty similar all year long, this is an important reminder not to overlook the strong drivers from some of these other teams, particularly the Ricky Flynn Motorsports kids. I think are a fair bit better than what they got to show so far, though I could be way off with that assumption. Meanwhile, we've had a huge swing in the title fight for the OK Seniors, considering the season dominator Christian Costoya has lost the lead with a bit of an off weekend and a critical crash in the final, leaving the lead to Mercedes junior Kenzo Craigie. It was in fact Craigie's first win in the seniors, but he looked just as calm under pressure as he did last year with his double world title. Kid is definitely going places. And keep in mind, he's one of the youngest on the grid as well. Quick shout out for Noah Wolf once again. He might not always have the results to back it up, but he has rapidly been turning into one of my favorite drivers to watch this season, always showing up with big pace and the aggressive overtaking to accommodate that. I don't think his CV fully reflects just how good he is at the moment. Watch out for his car racing debut. And that was already it for the week. F1, 2 and 3 has another important round next weekend at the Hungaroring, but if you've been here last year, you might remember this. There is one weekend a year where I swap racing for some top-level Counter-Strike, so next week's episode might be a bit shorter, a bit delayed, or both, but there will be some sort of video for sure. But until then, it is your time to drop your thoughts and opinions down in the comments so we can get our lovely little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.